What would you do at 19 if the whole territory had nothing to offer you except hunger, cold nights, and one condemned hunting lodge that could be yours for $3 silver? Rose Cooper had asked herself that question more than once before she placed those 3 coins on the county clerk's desk. She owned a tired mare named June, a battered wagon with a damaged wheel, a canvas bag of clothes, her mother's Bible, a folding knife, and 37 cents. Her father had been buried 6 months earlier, and before the grave soil had even settled, her stepmother had sold the family homestead and sent Rose away with nothing. For 11 weeks, Rose had slept beneath her wagon, under trees, beside fences, anywhere the night allowed. Now she stood inside the county office of Brier Hollow, trying to find a roof before winter found her first. The clerk, a thin man named Elias, listened quietly as Rose explained her situation. Then he opened an old drawer and pulled out a yellowed folder. "There is one property nobody wants," he said. 40 acres and an old hunting lodge above the hollow. The county has condemned it for years. Rose looked at the paper. "How much?" $3. Rose stared at him. "3." Elias nodded. "And there is a reason nobody has bought it." He lowered his voice. "People say the place is cursed. A man died there years ago, maybe more than one. I never investigated the stories." Rose looked toward the window. Outside, Brier Hollow was already preparing for evening. She thought of another night beneath canvas, another freezing morning, another town where nobody would hire a young woman traveling alone. $3 was nearly everything she had. But a roof, even a dangerous one, was better than sleeping beneath a wagon. She placed 3 silver coins on the desk. Elias stared at them. "Miss Cooper, are you certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything." He signed the deed, pressed the county seal into the paper, and handed it to her. As Rose turned to leave, Elias caught her attention. "There is one thing you should know. There is a locked door beneath the lodge. The county never opened it." Rose waited. "If I were you," he whispered, "I would leave it locked." Rose folded the deed and placed it inside her satchel. Outside, several men near the saloon had watched her enter the office. One large man wearing an expensive grey coat laughed when she walked out. $3 for a dead man's house!" he shouted. "Girl, you just bought yourself a grave." Rose ignored him, untied June, and started toward the ridge. The road out of Brier Hollow climbed through dry grass and tall pines. An old woman sitting outside a small house watched Rose pass. "You bought the Ridge Lodge," the woman said. Rose stopped. "Yes, ma'am." The old woman studied her carefully. "That house has been waiting for someone like you." Rose frowned. "What does that mean?" The woman shook her head. "Do not fear what was locked away. Fear the people who locked it away." Rose had no idea what she meant. She continued up the mountain. By sunset, the lodge appeared between the pines. The roof sagged, the porch was rotting, and one shutter hung from a single hinge. Yet it was standing. It was hers. Rose tied June beneath a half-collapsed lean-to and spent her first night on the porch. She barely slept. Somewhere inside the house, old timber creaked. Once she heard something that sounded like a faint knock beneath the floor. At sunrise, Rose entered. Dust floated through the pale light. A stone fireplace stood against one wall. An old table sat near the center, and a ladder led toward a dark loft. Everything looked abandoned, but something immediately caught her attention. A strange wooden beam crossed the ceiling, where no support was needed. Rose climbed onto the table and examined it. Someone had carved 4 words into the underside of the beam, for the ones below. Rose climbed down, slowly. Below. The word echoed in her mind. Elias had mentioned a locked door beneath the lodge. She spent the day repairing what she could, gathering firewood and patching the roof. Along the western wall, she discovered several small iron nails driven into the logs at the same height. They formed a line around the building, almost as if someone had placed them there deliberately. Rose remembered the old woman's words about a small hand. That night, she slept inside beside the cold fireplace with her knife nearby. Before dawn, she woke to a strange hollow sound beneath the floor. She lifted two loose boards and discovered a wooden hatch. An iron padlock the size of her fist held it shut. Rose had no key, so she removed the old hasp with a fireplace hook. The lock remained attached, but the hatch opened enough for a stream of freezing air to rise from the darkness. Rose held her lantern over the opening. Stone steps disappeared beneath the lodge. She took one breath, gripped her knife, and began climbing down. Rose descended 3 stone steps before stopping. The air beneath the lodge was so cold it felt like winter had been trapped underground for years. She raised her lantern and saw a narrow passage leading beneath the house. The walls were made of rough stone, but several sections had been reinforced with timber. Whoever built the place had not simply dug a cellar. They had built something meant to remain hidden. Rose continued downward until the passage opened into a small chamber. Against one wall stood wooden crates covered with dust. Beside them was an old workbench, several rusted tools, and a heavy iron box. Rose approached the box carefully. It had no lock. When she lifted the lid, she found dozens of folded papers tied together with faded string. The first page carried a name she recognized from an old gravestone in Brier Hollow: Samuel Cooper. Rose froze. Cooper was her father's name. Her hands began to tremble. She opened another paper. It was dated nearly 20 years earlier. The writing described land disputes, missing money, and a group of men who had secretly taken control of property around Brier Hollow. Rose read faster. Her father had not been the first Cooper connected to the lodge. Her grandfather had apparently known about the hidden chamber and had used it to protect documents, proving that several powerful men in the valley had stolen land from struggling families. Rose suddenly understood why the lodge had been condemned. It was not cursed. Someone had wanted everyone to believe it was. A floorboard creaked behind her. Rose turned sharply. Nothing. She raised the lantern and searched the passage. Empty. Then she heard it again. A soft scrape above her. Someone was inside the lodge. Rose extinguished the lantern and stood motionless in the darkness. Footsteps crossed the floor above. Slow, careful. Then came the sound of the hatch opening. Rose pressed herself against the stone wall. A man climbed down. She recognized the voice immediately. Boyd Merrick. "I know you're down there, girl," he said. "You should have listened to the clerk." Rose stayed silent. Merrick stepped closer. "Your father knew about this place. He should have kept his mouth shut." Rose's heart pounded. "What did you do to my father?" she asked. Silence followed. Then Merrick laughed quietly. "Your father was stubborn." Rose tightened her grip on the knife. "He didn't die naturally, did he?" Merrick did not answer. Instead, he moved toward the iron box. Rose watched his shadow approach. "Give me those papers," he said. "They belong to people who can make your life very difficult." Rose looked down at the documents. Suddenly she understood everything. The stories about the lodge, the warning, the condemned property, the fear in the valley. None of it had been about ghosts. It had been about secrets. Merrick reached for the box. Rose threw her lantern. It struck the stone wall and shattered, plunging the chamber into darkness. She ran. Merrick shouted behind her. Rose raced through the passage, climbed the steps, and slammed the hatch shut. She dragged the table across it just as Merrick struck the wood from below. Rose grabbed the papers and ran outside. June was already frightened, pulling against her rope. Rose saddled her mare, tied the documents beneath the saddle blanket, and rode down the ridge toward Brier Hollow. She had no idea who she could trust, but she knew one thing. The papers contained evidence that could destroy Boyd Merrick. At the edge of town, Rose stopped at the old woman's house. The woman looked at her face and immediately understood something had happened. "You opened it," she said. Rose nodded. "My father knew about the chamber." The old woman sighed. "Then the truth has finally come back." Rose asked who Merrick really was. The old woman told her that Boyd Merrick's family had controlled the valley for decades. They had bought land from desperate settlers for almost nothing, forged documents, and threatened anyone who challenged them. Rose's grandfather had discovered the scheme. Her father had later found proof. That was why both men had been silenced. Rose looked toward the ridge. "Then why was the lodge left standing?" The old woman answered quietly, "Because some secrets are too dangerous to destroy." Rose returned to the lodge before sunset. She searched the chamber again and discovered another hidden compartment behind the stone fireplace. Inside was a small wooden box containing a letter from her father. Rose opened it with shaking hands. The letter explained that he had known Merrick was watching him. He had hidden the final evidence beneath the lodge because he believed one day Rose might return. He wrote that if she ever found the letter, she should not trust the county office, the sheriff, or anyone wearing Merrick's silver watch chain. Rose finished reading with tears in her eyes. Her father had known he might not survive. He had prepared a path for her, and now she understood why the deed had been sold for $3. Merrick had wanted the property gone without drawing attention. But Rose had accidentally bought the one place in the valley where the truth had been buried. That evening, Rose placed the papers inside her Bible and waited. She knew Merrick would return, and this time she would be ready. Night settled over Brier Hollow like a heavy blanket. Rose sat beside the cold fireplace with her father's letter in her lap and the hidden documents secured beneath her Bible. She could hear the wind moving through the pines, but beneath it came another sound, the distant rhythm of horses climbing the ridge. Merrick had returned. Rose extinguished her lamp and waited in darkness. 3 riders stopped outside the lodge. Merrick entered first. 2 armed men followed. "Rose," he called softly, "you have something that belongs to me." She said nothing. Merrick stepped farther inside. "Your father made the same mistake. He believed papers could defeat men like us." Rose finally spoke. "My father believed the truth would survive." Merrick laughed. "Truth doesn't survive in a valley like this. Money does." He searched the room. Rose remained hidden behind the loft ladder. Then she heard another horse outside. Merrick stopped. "Who else is here?" The door opened. The old woman from the valley stepped inside carrying a lantern. Behind her came Elias, the county clerk, and 2 settlers Rose had seen in town. Elias held a rifle. "Enough, Boyd," he said. Merrick stared at him. "You?" Elias raised the documents Rose had given him earlier. "The girl brought me copies before she returned here." Rose stepped into the light. Merrick's face changed. "You don't have the papers," he said. Rose held up her Bible. "No, but I have something better. My father left a letter explaining everything." The settlers gathered closer. Rose read the letter aloud. It named the families whose land had been stolen and described the forged deeds, secret payments and threats used by Merrick's family. Then she produced the final documents from beneath the Bible. One by one, the settlers recognized their fathers' and grandfathers' names. A man near the doorway began to cry. Another whispered, "My father told me this story." Merrick stepped backward. "These papers are worthless." Elias shook his head. "Not anymore." He had brought the county records from Brier Hollow. The documents matched. The stolen properties could be traced. The signatures had been forged. The witnesses had been paid. The entire valley had been built partly on a lie. Merrick reached for his gun. Before he could draw it, the old woman struck his wrist with her lantern. His weapon fell. The two men with him hesitated. They looked around and saw that they were surrounded by people who had spent years living in fear. One lowered his rifle. The other followed. Merrick was arrested before sunrise. By noon, the story had spread through every street in Brier Hollow. The lodge was no longer called Cursed. People began calling it the House of Truth. The county reopened the old cases. Families who had lost their land decades earlier began filing claims. Merrick's wealth was seized while investigators uncovered even more evidence hidden in his offices. Rose did not become rich overnight. She still had a broken wagon, a tired mare, and a lodge that needed almost everything repaired. But she had something she had not possessed in 11 weeks: a home. She repaired the roof, replaced the porch boards, cleaned the stone fireplace, and built a proper door for the cellar. She kept the hidden chamber exactly as it was. Months later, she planted a small garden beside the lodge. June grazed peacefully in the clearing, while smoke rose from the chimney. One spring morning, Elias climbed the ridge carrying a package. Inside was the original county deed. $3, he said with a smile. Best purchase Brier Hollow ever saw. Rose laughed. I thought I bought a broken house. Elias looked toward the cellar door. You bought the truth. Rose thought about her father, her mother's Bible, the lonely road, and the 3 silver coins that had seemed like her last chance. She realized they had been her first chance instead. The lodge had never been cursed. The curse had been fear, the fear that kept good people silent while powerful men controlled their lives. Rose stayed on that ridge for the rest of her life. She never forgot the warning carved beneath the beam, for the ones below. Years later, she understood what it really meant. It was not written for ghosts. It was written for the forgotten families, buried beneath the weight of someone else's lies. And every time Rose heard someone in Brier Hollow tell the old story about the 19-year-old girl who bought a cursed hunting lodge for $3 silver, she would smile and say, "It was never cursed. It was waiting." If you enjoyed this story from Wild West Tales Stories, subscribe for more frontier mysteries, hidden secrets, and unforgettable tales from the Old West. And tell us in the comments where you're listening from tonight, because somewhere beyond the next ridge, another forgotten story may still be waiting to be found.